crowd is that we've until now focused upon what they describe as the diagonal terms in the matrix that describes a quantum particle, but it's the off-diagonal terms that are necessary to describe rotation. And so rotation is described mathematically as the curl of a field. It's described as vorticity to the fluids dynamic community. But that aspect of the universe seems to be the missing component. So that just as Einstein was looking for a quantum relativistic field theory of gravity and never found it, it seems extremely likely now that it could not be found until somebody put in the vorticity and understood that that field and that aspect of the universe that describes particles could also describe vorticity, a spinning motion of fluids or things, and that's the activity that the mind is going through. That is when the mind is focusing on something, it's resonating with the universe's vorticity and can create vorticity of its own.
And so looking at the changes that are going on in the planet right now, we're talking about the alignment, talking about possible, people consider as like DNA upgrades. So is it possible that that we can have something bigger than our own fields, something bigger than our own energy field? Could we have a vortex of energy in a place in space on a planet that we create, or your own Merkaba field, so to speak? Is that
so
possible?
Almost certainly, our human civilization transmits to the universe a very powerful wave of our existence. And this is our resonance with the universe, and that's our consciousness. And so it's my suspicion that the way this works is that we as individuals make a tiny 1/billionth level contribution to that overall vorticity that describes the human consciousness. And so we are, in some ways, as individuals, I believe, surfing on a great wave, just as you were trying to describe now, a great wave that describes our consciousness. And then you've heard me describe how probably the thing that Carl Jung was talking about, this consciousness of all our civilization, is in a similar way the sum of all human consciousness generating that activity that creates the reversed wave, which then interferes with the background Orgone field and creates its realization for each of us personally. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, if he's doing it and he's doing it and she's doing it, then isn't there a great wave of this kind then that represents the sum of all human activity? And that's the counter wave, that's the complex conjugate of the universe supplied wave. And that's a function of every human being's conscious activity that we create that wave. So you have then the interaction between human beings and consciousness is the Orgone field affects human brain waves. The human being has the ability to receive that, and now I should point to my left lobe. That's probably received on the left side. Then I think it's the hypothalamus in the brain that induces the right shell of the brain to produce the complex conjugate of that wave. So that means something to a mathematician. It's the same wave, but with some aspects of it reversed. And that's why we have the brain that's got two mirrors images. It's got a left mirror, a left side image that receives from the universe, and the right mirror side creates the complex conjugate of that. And so that's the human generated wave then, which is this thing that Carl Jung was talking about. This consciousness, or this I can't think of the word he used. I had it an hour ago, but it creates that consciousness of our civilization. And then all of us are doing the same thing, so that gets added up by the universe. Just as the universe adds up the quantum holograms of every electron and every proton, and that's a wave that this house emanates, that the Earth emanates, that the whole solar system emanates.
So what do you guys? I mean, do you guys think that people should, like, if somebody already has a higher level of consciousness, I always say, I don't like to say consciousness. It's more like that they're operating from the heart, right? They've got that frequency vibration, from their heart that they're operating. Can they amplify all of what they already are by using a device like Orgone, like a cosmic tube? Or are there other devices that are out there that can aid in that? I don't know. I don't know that answer. So
doing this without using anything, actually. We were going back to college. But we were doing some consciousness experiments there. We were actually actively working on building up energy. And we found that it had a profound effect on everybody around us. Like, we would keep the entire frat house awake all night. And they would be giddy doing silly things while we were building up energy. And it was only the times we actually did this as an experiment that this occurred and affected everybody in the whole frat house. So I think actually people can build up individual energy that has effects on everyone around them as well. People feel it.
Okay, but how does that then relate to, like, remineralizing the earth back and giving to the earth that is not, we're pockets of the earth that doesn't have the energy in it because of crystals that have been taken out and oil and all the minerals of the earth that have been depleted.
Technologies are good to use as well. I wouldn't preclude those. I'm just saying that if you can get a mass of people operating at a higher level, it's infectious. It's
well, that's what we've always known in prayer. I mean, isn't that what prayer is?
Oh yeah, it is.
Prayer in churches is everybody focusing their energy on one mission, one purpose, one ideal, and that adds up, and the universe hears that.
I think that's true. I think it is true. So we actually are acting as our own little Orgone amplifiers independently already. And if we could get maybe a little more organized and focused about it, we might be able to do things on that level also.
And thank you. And so is there something to the antipodal? Is there something to that if you've got a group of people in one part of the world and then antipodally another group of people that have the same intention, they have the same intention? Is there some magic to that, so to speak, or is there something that's increased in terms of the rate or the intensity of the frequency in order to get these two to connect?
So I see it very much so. I imagine it would work much as I described the brain. Remember, I said that the brain works because one side can resonate with the universe, and then the other side can be instructed to generate the counter wave.
Okay.
Well, the same thing will happen with two antipodal civilizations. So I'm North American centric, so I imagine that in North America, the brain is doing whatever it does, but in some kind of unison, and that's what we talk about as the thing we respond to in prayer and we call prayer. And then anybody on the other side of the earth should be able to create the mirror image of that.
Okay, all right.
So it's again the mirror imaging thing that goes on in the brain would be happening globally also.
Okay.
And so we would all be working on the same quantum hologram, meaning the hologram for peace or happiness or well-being, and there would be a counter one of those in Australia, and those would then be trying to collapse the universal wave and bringing the reality of this to our civilization on our planet. It makes a lot of sense. There's another aspect to this, and I don't quite know yet, can't imagine yet how this works, and that is, remember Edgar Mitchell always talked about how we live in a dyadic universe. And that means that for any attribute in the universe has to have its opposite attribute. So, for example, for there to be a happy, there has to be a sad. For there to be good, there has to be evil. That's because any of these attributes have to be expressed in these quantum waves, and if the wave exists, then its negative or opposite would exist also. And when you think about it, if you were building a universe, and in particular building a quantum universe, well, that would be the obvious thing to do. If you create any attribute, then you create its opposite at the same time, and the universe is balanced at zero. In other words, it's the way you make something out of nothing. If you start with nothing and you want to have something, well, then you create the opposite, and so in balance.